It really is a real privilege for me to be here. I've gone to several of these conferences and have sat in the back and kind of watched and given myself a talk or what would I say about that certain issue. So it's really thrilling for me to be here with you all today and be able to address you. I had a funny moment this morning as I was getting ready. I was doing my hair in front of the mirror and marveling at the beauty, and I started to chuckle to myself because I thought, you know, if somebody came to me 21 years ago and said, Al, you're going to be living in Utah, you're going to be Mormon, you're going to be in the Utah State Senate, and on January 17th at 11:55 a.m., you're going to be speaking to a room full of white folks. I would have said, you are crazy. But it's a blessing. I'm here because of the hand of God. There's no question about it. You know, I want to quote from the Declaration of Independence, one of my most favorite documents that I hope we all are reading on a regular basis and sharing with our posterity. But it says, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just power from the consent of the governed. So there we have. Thank you. Cutting into my time, but thank you. We have right there, right before our eyes, the primary purpose of government, and that is to protect the rights of the people. Those rights that come to you from God at the moment that you were born. We have the right to defend ourselves. We have the right to choose a profession. We have the right to marry. We have the right to petition our government. And we have the right to educate our children. Parents have the duty and obligation to feed their children, to clothe them, to discipline them, and to educate them. Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution outlines for us what our 20 enumerated powers are for the United States Congress. Education is not one of those powers. And when big government gets involved in an area that it's not supposed to be involved in, then you have to create more government to cover up those problems when government initially got involved. So in the early 1960s, 1963 to be exact, we took God out of schools, which happens to coincide with the free fall to mediocrity. And in the mid-1960s, under President Johnson's War on Poverty program, we established the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, where we introduced federal money into education system that should have been done at the local level, that was working at the local level. And then 1977, the Department of Education is created to deal with those problems created in the 60s. And then President Reagan, bless his heart, tried to get rid of the Department of Education. So then let's fast forward to President Clinton, Goals 2000, to deal with earlier problems. And then George W. Bush, No Child Left Behind, to deal with Clinton's problems that Clinton created. So what you have there in No Child Left Behind is a mandate for states to reach 100% proficiency. So what do you do as a state in order to meet that number? What you do is you lower the standards. You lower the standards across the board. And then we've created another problem. So then, now today, we've got Common Core with more rigorous standards to deal with the lower standards that No Child Left Behind created. So the issue today is not whether Common Core is more rigorous or not, or is good or bad. It violates a primary principle that parents have an inherent right to educate their children. Parenting is done at the local level. Decisions on administration, curriculum, principles, what's going to be taught in the class should be done at the local level where the action is. So in order to preserve those rights of our parents and start to peel away the what has happened in taking power from our parents and our local communities, we've got several pieces of legislation that are before us. One of the bills that I'm running this session, along with Brian Green in the House, is partisan school board elections. Thank you. The current system lacks clarity, transparency, and accountability to the parents. And we need that piece of legislation passed so we can properly vet the candidates. I just went through that process. Our caucus system, I love our caucus system. We are a republic, not a democracy. And I saw many delegates, many of you are here in the room today, 2, 3, 4, 5 times throughout the process. And that's the way it's supposed to be, because the average everyday American doesn't have time to vet the candidates. So then you get together in a neighborhood caucus and you select a delegate. And that delegate's responsibility is to go vet the candidates. And I went through that process and I love it. Number 2, we have to remove ourselves from Common Core. We have to have the legislative fortitude to do so, and we can do it if we desire to do so. Thirdly, I'd like to do a pilot project that really will put on notice those who say they want local control. We need to decentralize down to the local level, and I associate my remarks with Oak in terms of wanting to do that pilot program where we've got a high school that is set up as its own district and have the money, instead of going to the State School Board of Education, why don't we send it directly to the district? And then they can decide where the money goes, and then the state school board and the district school board invoice the high school on the services that they provide. That will create some transparency and probably shed light on the inefficiencies and the unimportance of the school board at the state level and at the district level. Used to be that way, and it worked. So what I've outlined is not easy to do. It will take a monumental effort, and that your legislators cannot do it alone. And it's so critical for us as a group to collectively educate ourselves on principle, to speak principle. Now, what will happen is you'll engage a legislator or a bureaucrat, and then you're dragged down into the weeds of the issue. But if you can talk principle, if you educate yourself on principle, a parent's inalienable right to educate their children, and you start at that level, then you raise the level of the conversation. And you're also speaking truth when you do that, and it resonates. It resonates with people when you speak truth. Now, I know we have a feeling sometimes that things are lost, that the bureaucracy is so big. What can I do as an individual to affect change? And you be remarkable in what you can do. Because I think there's a few things that I want to go through to highlight for you what we can do as individuals to make ourselves weapons for good and part of the solution. And when we do these 4 things, then the heavens are justified to intervene on our behalf and come to our aid and help us. The first bit of advice I'd like to give you, and the first thing I want you to know and learn and understand and appreciate, is that freedom is a gift from God, not government. That our freedoms come from God, not government. Number 2, quality family time must be a high priority. The core unit which determines the strength of any society is the family. Therefore, the government should foster and promote its integrity. Number 3, we must educate ourselves to be part of the solution and not the problem. Those who have contributed to unraveling the fabric of America and those ideals and those principles upon which this nation is founded are doing so under ignorance. They're motivated by their education. Abraham Lincoln said, "The philosophy of the schoolroom in one generation is the philosophy of government in the next." And that's what's happened here. We have to know and learn about which principles upon which this nation was founded. And we have to teach these principles to our children. We have to fill in the void that they're not getting in the schoolroom. I'm so fortunate to be married to a woman who 8 years ago decided that during our family devotional, we would incorporate these principles. And we started reading the 5,000-Year Leap. She started reading that book. And Glenn Beck told her to do so. And when she first came and said she wanted to teach these principles in our home, and she talked about Glenn Beck and took the picture down of me and put Glenn Beck's picture up, I said, I don't know about this. But guess what? When we started doing these things in our devotional, then I started catching the vision. Because it starts with the mother. It starts with mom's in charge of the house. So when mom wants to do something, dad will go along eventually. And that's what's happened in our home. Our kids know the Constitution. They know these principles because, by golly, they're going to be part of the solution and not the problem. And we have to take that responsibility upon ourselves seriously to teach our children, to teach our nieces and our nephews and our grandchildren these things. One thing we also need to understand as we go about learning these principles, and it involves the consequences associated with legislating what God has already ruled upon. We must understand that we live in a republic, and it's based on the rule of law. A democracy, on the other hand, allows the majority to rule and is primarily based on feelings and emotion. So when you're not based on feeling and emotion and you're based on those natural law and those principles, a republic, you will understand, is rooted in natural biblical law. Meaning if God has already ruled on that issue, government has no business being in that area. Marriage is a perfect example of what we've done to that ourselves. We legislated it. We defined in code what marriage is when God has already spoken on it. So when you do that, then you give the government the ability to interpret and define what you just codified in code. And what has happened here, the quickest way to give away your God-given inalienable rights is to legislate them. So I really want you all to be cautious as you move forward in legislating what God has already talked about. He has already told us we have religious liberty and our own conscience to worship him any way we please. So please, please be mindful of that. And the solution is to just say no. The solution to the problem is to say no. How cool would it have been for our governor when the Supreme Court decided not to hear the marriage case to say, you know what, I'm not going to allow what was done in the 10th Circuit to rule over the people in Utah. We're going to stand together and say no. We're going to say no to the 10th Circuit. We're going to say no to infringement upon religious liberty. We're going to say no to federal encroachment in education. And when someone has the fortitude to say no, we need to gather around that individual and stand with them. And fourth, we need to get involved at the local level. We must choose leaders who understand the proper role of government, which is to protect the rights of the people, and on the state level is to protect the people from a runaway federal government. So I want to close by thanking the Eagle Forum for putting together this wonderful conference. I'm grateful to the leadership of Gail Ruzicka. She's been a mentor to me. I really appreciate all that she does. She and the ladies get together during the session, and they're up there every day fighting for families. And all of us have an opportunity to go join them, to take time of our busy schedules to go up and be involved in the process. Because in order to affect change, it has to start from the bottom up. It cannot come from the top down. And Oak spoke about that beautifully, and so did Tim Ballard when he talked about slavery. It's us collectively coming together as a people to say no and to work with our legislators to affect that change. It's got to come from the bottom up. It is not going to work from the top down. We have to be at these town hall meetings. We have to insist that our members have these town hall meetings. We have to write, we have to email, we have to text. And when there's a battle, you run to the battle. And if you get bloodied and bruised along the way, congratulations. As John Adams said, duty is ours, results are God's. Repeat that after me. Duty is ours, results are God. And if we can do those things, if we can put ourselves in a position to be part of the solution, to educate ourselves in principle, then we become a weapon for good. And collectively, and it doesn't take that many of us, collectively, we can make a difference. God bless you all for being here. God bless the state of Utah, and God bless America. Thank you.